April 10, 1912. The largest ship ever built leaves Southampton Harbor. Newspapers call her practically unsinkable. On board, over 2,000 passengers, dreaming of a new life in America. 4 days later, the sea is calm. The night, moonless and still. Somewhere ahead, in the dark, something waits. What if I told you? This wasn't just bad luck. What if the Titanic had never sunk at all? The answer isn't just fewer deaths. It's a world that never learns a hard lesson. A lesson that, in our real history, saved countless lives afterward. This is the story of the ship that promised safety. And the uncomfortable truth about what its sinking actually built. Because sometimes, disaster is the only teacher anyone listens to. The RMS Titanic was the largest moving object ever built by human hands, over 880 feet long, 9 decks tall, a floating monument to progress. Its builders never actually called it unsinkable. The newspapers did. The design used 16 watertight compartments sealed by heavy doors. Engineers believed it could stay afloat even with 4 compartments flooded. On April 10th, it left Southampton, bound for New York. Aboard, the wealthiest families in the world and hundreds of hopeful emigrants. First class, second class, third class, each kept carefully separate. 4 days into the crossing, the sea turned unusually calm and flat. Throughout April 14th, other ships sent warning after warning. Icebergs, ice fields. 7 separate messages reached the Titanic that day. One came from a ship called the Californian. Heavy pack ice, dead ahead. The wireless operator receiving it was overwhelmed with passenger messages. He never passed that warning onto the bridge. Captain Edward Smith adjusted the course slightly south, but not the speed. The ship continued near full speed into a night with no moon. In the crow's nest, 2 lookouts strained to see through the darkness. The binoculars normally kept there had been left behind in England. An officer reassigned before departure had taken the locker key with him. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted something dead ahead. Too late. An iceberg, scraping along the starboard hull for several seconds. It didn't crash through the ship. It sliced it, like a can opener. The damage stretched across nearly 300 feet of hull. 6 compartments flooded, 2 more than the ship was built to survive. The watertight walls didn't reach high enough. Water spilled over the top. Below decks, engineers understood almost immediately. This ship was going to sink. On deck, most passengers felt only a faint shudder. Many kept playing cards. It would take nearly 2.5 hours to fully go under. There were 20 lifeboats aboard, enough for about half those on board. It technically met the outdated safety regulations of the time. The rules were based on a ship's weight, not how many people it carried. Women and children first was the order. Not everyone followed it evenly. Many boats launched only half full, crews unsure how much weight they'd hold. Third-class passengers, deep in the ship, struggled to even reach the deck. A ship called the Californian sat less than 20 miles away. Its crew saw distress rockets fired into the sky. 8 of them. Its captain assumed they were only company signals and went back to bed. Its wireless operator had switched off the radio and gone to sleep. As the ship tilted further, the ship's band kept playing on deck. Witnesses say it was meant to keep passengers calm as long as possible. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke apart and disappeared beneath the water. Over 1,500 people died, mostly from the freezing water itself. Only around 700 survived, plucked from lifeboats hours later. A ship called the Carpathia, racing through the dark, reached them just after dawn. News of the disaster stunned the entire world within days. Inquiries followed in both the United States and Britain. The findings were damning. Outdated rules, ignored warnings, sheer overconfidence. The unsinkable ship had needed only one mistake, repeated many times over. Now imagine one small change. Imagine that locker key never left with the reassigned officer. Imagine the lookouts that night actually had their binoculars. On a calm, moonless sea, even a few extra seconds change everything. In our story, a lookout spots the iceberg's shape sooner. Just sooner. The bridge gets the order out in time. Hard to starboard. Full reverse. The ship doesn't slice along the hull. It grazes past and holds. One compartment floods, maybe two. Nowhere near enough to sink her. The Titanic limps toward New York, damaged but afloat. Passengers arrive shaken, but alive. Every single one of them. Newspapers run the story anyway. Titanic survives iceberg scare. Then the story fades, the way most near misses eventually do. The ship keeps sailing for years, just another liner on the Atlantic run. Unsinkable stops being an ironic headline. It becomes marketing that actually worked. History barely pauses to notice how close it came. To understand what's lost, you have to understand what the disaster forced. In the real timeline, the sinking exposed just how outdated maritime law was. Lifeboat requirements had been based on tonnage, written decades before. A ship could be perfectly legal and still carry boats for half its passengers. After the disaster, that loophole became impossible to defend publicly. In 1914, nations signed the first International Safety of Life at Sea Treaty. It required enough lifeboats for every single person on board. No exceptions. It required a 24-hour radio watch, so no distress call goes unheard again. It's the same treaty framework that still governs ocean travel today. In our story, without the disaster, none of that urgency exists. The old tonnage-based rules simply stay on the books. Ships keep sailing legally under-equipped because nothing forced a change. Radio operators still keep irregular hours. Distress calls still risk going unheard. Somewhere down the line, another ship hits another iceberg, another storm. Without Titanic's lesson learned early, that disaster likely costs even more lives. The International Ice Patrol was created specifically because of this sinking. It has tracked icebergs in the North Atlantic shipping lanes ever since. In our story, no one creates it. Ships keep crossing those same waters blind. Beyond the law, something cultural changes too, in the real timeline. The disaster became a permanent symbol of overconfidence meeting nature. It reshaped how engineers talk about safety margins for over a century. It became one of the most retold stories in modern history and film. Without the sinking, that entire cultural weight simply never accumulates. And there's a quieter loss too. The disaster forced a hard look at class. Survival rates that night split sharply along first, second, and third-class lines. Third-class passengers, restricted deep in the ship, died at far higher rates. That inequality became public, undeniable, and impossible to justify afterward. It pushed uncomfortable questions about class and safety into public conversation. In our story, that reckoning simply doesn't happen. Not yet, anyway. The same quiet inequalities keep operating, unnoticed, on ship after ship. So a world without the Titanic sinking isn't simply 1,500 people spared. It's a world that has to relearn every one of these lessons, the hard way. Somewhere, on some other ship, in some other decade, it happens anyway. Historians call this a grim pattern. Safety rules arrive after tragedy, rarely before. Titanic just happened to be famous enough to force the issue immediately. Without it, some quieter disaster eventually does the same job, less remembered, just with a different name, a different date, the same outdated rulebook. Nature and bureaucracy, it seems, tend to find their reckoning eventually. It's simply a question of how many people pay for the delay. That's the strange trade this tragedy made, without anyone agreeing to it. Now it would be easy to end the story there. Too easy. Because let's be honest about something deeply uncomfortable. It can sound like this video is arguing the sinking was secretly good. It wasn't. Not for a single one of the 1,500 who died. Isidore and Ida Strauss, the owners of a great department store, were offered a lifeboat. Ida refused to leave without her husband. They stayed together until the end. The ship's band kept playing music on deck as the water kept rising. Every one of them went down with the ship they were trying to calm. J. Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line's chairman, survived in a lifeboat. He spent the rest of his life defending that choice to a public that never forgave him. Grief doesn't care about the safety reforms that came afterward. A mother in third class, trapped behind a locked gate, gained nothing from history's lesson. The economic and legal benefits took years to even take effect. And the people who died that night never lived to see any of it. That discomfort is part of this story too, not a footnote to skip past. Real lives were the price of lessons that should have been learned for free. Today, the same safety framework born from this disaster still protects travelers. Every lifeboat drill on every cruise ship traces back to this one night. The wreck itself now sits protected, 2.5 miles down, as a memorial. So maybe the honest version isn't the disaster made travel safer. Maybe it's this: some lessons humanity only ever learns by paying for them first. The truly frightening question isn't why the Titanic sank. It's how many other unsinkable assumptions are still out there, untested. The greatest questions in history aren't about what happened. They're about what almost didn't. This is Oviora. Keep wondering.